Well, welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. An historic moment in American history. Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty to all counts in court in Miami, facing 37 criminal charges over his handling of classified documents. He's the first current or former president to ever face federal charges. Commentator and author Meghan McCain joins me now. Well, Meghan, I just had a very robust defence of Donald Trump from Carrie Lake.
Yeah.
I can't imagine you share that view.
And I would just like to say, I think you're and I think you're one of the most even-keeled journalists working in media. I didn't understand how antagonistic.
It's when she says you lot, like we're all the same. Outrageous. But Meghan, great to have you on the show.
I was like, you were literally fired for free speech.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyway,
Thank you, Meghan.
It's a pleasure to be here as well.
It's great to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here as well.
What is your reaction to this really quite historic moment? I mean, this is the first time any American president, current or ex, has ever been charged with federal charges. This is a big moment.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it will be something that my children will read about in history books. And it's, it's really disheartening. It's really depressing. As an American, it's embarrassing. I mean, the global culture is watching us and, seeing what's happening. He's by far the front runner, as you saw with your last guest. There are people that will vote for him if he is, sent to prison and would be running the country from prison. So it's amazing to me that, he's accused of 37 counts. It's a lot. General Petraeus almost went to jail for 3. So I think we're in a situation that is obviously unprecedented and, unusual waters, but that's no different than anything we've dealt with President Trump. I'm interested to see how the current group of people running for president on the Republican ticket are going to be handling it going forward, because right now a lot of them are defending him.
Right. I mean, that's the really interesting question, isn't it? Because at some point, the Republican Party has to make a decision about whether it can actually go forward with a guy who's facing not just state charges over hush payments to a porn star, but is now facing 37 incredibly serious charges on this indictment, about under the Espionage Act, about basically using classified documents related to nuclear power, to how you would go after enemy states and so on. This is not chicken feed. This is serious stuff.
No, and look, I woke up this morning to the news that I read online that there was a person who had gone to the White House and appeared topless at a pride party over the weekend. And I was just saddened and also horrified at the state of different kinds of things going on in the country. Joe Biden is an incredibly weak candidate. 75% of independent candidates, voters don't want him running for president. 80% of Republicans, over 50% of Democrats don't want him running for president. Republicans can literally only lose this election if we nominate Donald Trump. And it looks like that's what we're doing. And I think we're going to have a really hard look as to what our party, but also what our country is going to look like with him being the front runner. That being said, I don't see a lot of courage coming out of Washington, D.C. and courage coming out of these candidates running. There's no one I'm particularly excited about, including Ron DeSantis. And none of this is good enough. And I think part of it is if you walk this line where you're going to, suck up to President Trump and want to get his supporters, but at the same time want to, differentiate yourself from him, it's not something that's going to be possible. And I do think there is a lot of voter fatigue, and those 75% of independent voters are going to make or break this election. And if there's one thing we've learned, they do not like President Trump.
I mean, look, this whole debate around Trump has got so toxic, so tribal. I've had times when I've supported Trump, and I've had times, not least when he attacked your great father, when I felt his behaviour has been completely sickening and demeaning of anyone who's ever held the office of president. So Trump is this kind of character where you can like him for some things and detest him for others, but he's got this extraordinary stranglehold over a large number of Republican voters. And if you're going to try and beat him for the nomination, you've got to somehow, as you've just rather well articulated, you've got to somehow bring those people with you without trashing their hero. It's difficult.
Yeah, and your last guest, not to make it too personal, but she went down that road and told anyone who voted for McCain to get the hell out, and that's exactly what happened to her. She is not the governor of Arizona, no matter what she thinks in her brain. And the exact same thing will happen to President Trump. He has lost Arizona, a very valuable swing state. This will come down to 3 swing states in the United States of America, as it always does. And President Trump has lost all 3 the last 2 election cycles. So I'm not exactly sure why we continue to put our cart next to this losing losing horse, especially given, as you said, the historic circumstances today. But, you know, I'm 38. I'm a different generation. I'm a different voter demographic. And there just seems to be a lot of, quite frankly, older boomers that have a stranglehold on the party and want to see President Biden get reelected. And I, for one, don't want an 86-year-old to be president, leaving office in the next cycle. I think that's a very dangerous precedent for our country. And my understanding is, I work at a UK publication at a job you used to have at the Daily Mail, that a lot of our friends across the pond think it's quite bizarre that we have a president that's this old and would be that old if reelected.
Well, you could have a choice at the 2024 election if things go the way people fear, where you have a man who appears to be senile against someone who might actually have been convicted of federal offences under the Espionage Act. I mean, it's a completely extraordinary situation.
Yeah, and I think it's why a lot of people are looking at RFK Jr. I'm not a fan of his nor a supporter, but he has upwards of 20% of Democrat support right now, independent support coming strong. And I don't think it's that he's a particularly interesting candidate or politician. You know, I think he's an activist married to a famous actress, but I think it's just that people are just so thirsty for anything that's different than these two candidates. And just from a, you know, holistic standpoint for the American people, this is a very depressing, very scary time to have these two men as the most powerful men leading both parties. And I think it's a recipe for disaster. And I quite frankly think it's a recipe for even more disenfranchisement of what people call the establishment, what people call, you know, as Carrie Lake was saying, like people in media circles and establishment media. I don't adhere to that line of thinking, but it does make you very cynical about who's running things. And I think an example of that is the Democratic National Committee is not allowing President Biden to do any debates. I think the American public deserves to watch him debate any of the candidates who are running for president. And like I said, RFK Jr. has over 20%. Marianne Williamson has 10%. These are not numbers that any Democrat strategist should be ignoring right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. Meghan, always read your columns in the Daily Mail. They're the second best columns the Mail's ever run, obviously.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
You always provoke thought, and that's the best thing about being a good columnist. So thank you very much indeed for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So what does this all mean for the future of the Republican Party in the 2024 presidential race? Look here, live pictures here of a courtroom in Miami where the recently deposed President Trump has just been charged on 37 counts. 37, involving classified documents of the most top secret stuff, apparently involving America's nuclear program, its plans for potentially attacking enemy states and so on. Very sensitive stuff that he shouldn't have had in the first place. And then when he was asked to hand it back, according to the indictment, he didn't hand a lot of it back. So these are serious things. And you can explain away Trump, defend him as much as you want, feel like, you know, he's getting a hard time. The indictment is serious when you read it. Joining me now is the Conservative radio host, Ben Ferguson, host of the Rubin Report, Dave Rubin. All right, guys, there's a battle raging here now for the soul of the Republican Party and a real quandary. What does the Republican Party do about this growing number of legal issues that Donald Trump is facing? Ben Ferguson, where are we here? Donald Trump, all right, you have the Stormy Daniels stuff. You can sort of joke that away, say it's trivial, bit of a witch hunt, stupid. I don't disagree with that particularly. But this stuff, when I read the indictment, is very serious. If this was Joe Biden and it was leveled at him or Obama, you would be leading the charge probably to have him executed.
Not executed, but I would be leading the charge for classified documents. If you're going to have this level of accountability for a Republican, then damn it, you better do it for everybody on the left that has also done this. And there was no accountability. And this is going to be why this is not a big issue in the primary for Donald Trump. There was zero accountability for Hillary Clinton, the 3,000, 30,000 plus emails, literally telling her staff to take hammers to Blackberries and cell phones, zero accountability. And that's going to be the talking point for Donald Trump. I think he actually gets closer to the nomination today with this indictment because there are so many Americans, conservatives, that are sick and tired of a two-tier justice system where this system goes after Republicans and looks the other way when there's meetings on tarmacs between former President Bill Clinton and the Attorney General talking about Hillary Clinton. They've had enough of it. Now, Does that mean that this is going to be a good thing for the Republicans and the general? I think it's way too soon to tell, Piers. But ultimately, right now, there's a lot of pissed off Americans that are sick and tired of this two-justice system here. And there's a lot of examples of it. I mean, for goodness sakes, look at the day they charged him. You've got intel that apparently $5 million went from one of the executives at Burisma in a bribery scheme to the sitting president of the United States of America. And the majority of the mainstream media was silent on it. So are people shocked by this? No, they're not. They're angry over it.
Let me bring in Dave, though, because the issue to me is there's also a political element to this. And if I'm a Republican, there's rapidly coming a point when you have clear options. I mean, you could have Ron DeSantis. I went down to Florida and interviewed him. I thought he was pretty impressive. He's a genuine conservative. He's been wildly successful in Florida, turning a 33,000 majority into 1.5 million. He's Trump without the baggage. He's very Trumpian in all of his policies. You know, Trump's tried to rubbish him and rubbish what he's achieved. It's obviously, in my estimation, complete nonsense, that charge. Why would the Republicans want to pursue the Trump road to nomination when it's so fraught with potential danger and when he might be the only person that could actually let Joe Biden win?
Well, the short answer to that is that Trump does have a certain captivation over the world in the last, decade or so that allows people to follow him whether things are working or not working. Look, at the moment, I agree with you and with Ben on this idea that the thing that people are most upset by at the moment is the selective prosecution and persecution of Donald Trump. When they see the asymmetry that Biden and Hillary and even Mike Pence as VP can get away with classified document things and Donald Trump can't, that asymmetry is what bothers people. But on the DeSantis front, I completely agree with you, Piers. We have what I think, and I moved to Florida during COVID in large part because of Ron DeSantis and moved my family here and 2 companies here. And I have a ton of flourishing people that I'm around now in a state that is functioning, I would say, really at the pinnacle of the world for freedom right now. We have a guy who has done everything he has set out to do in his legislative agenda. He has fought the woke. He has got the neo-racism out of the schools. He's gotten the gender stuff out. In effect, he beat Disney. He's doing all of the things that anyone who is conservative-minded or right-leaning or roughly Republican or even a disaffected liberal, which there's a lot of people. I think you're probably a little bit in that category. I think he's the guy that can get everybody out of this. But that's sort of a separate issue than what the base of the base, the Carrie Lake types, who I like how she's on one hand calling you a sellout and then also saying, God bless you, I love talking to you, that they're never going to leave the Trump orbit. But I think Ron DeSantis offers a chance for a whole bunch of new people to come into the fold. Trump, I just don't see where the new people are. Even putting aside all of the indictments and the craziness, where are the new Trump voters?
Well, that's a good question.
I just don't know.
Let me bring Ben back on that. I mean, the real issue is who can win the independents, for example. I just don't see independents liking any of this. They're all just looking at this aghast. And I don't disagree with you, by the way. There are legitimate allegations of double standards in the way that Hillary's emails and Joe Biden's documents and so on have been treated by the liberal-skewed mainstream media. I completely agree with that. But purely on Trump and what he's done here and what we apparently are going to hear from his own voice on a tape where he concedes these are not declassified documents, contrary to everything he's been saying. This is a real sword of Damocles hanging over the party. And you could end up with the most damaged candidate in history, and that might be the only way Biden, notwithstanding all his issues, ends up winning. So why is the smart play for the Republicans not to go for a much safer option of Ron DeSantis?
Great question. Look, I like Ron DeSantis. I said this, I don't want a civil war the night after Ron DeSantis announced. And I said, if you took Donald Trump's name and referred to him as candidate A, and you took DeSantis' name off a page and said candidate B, both of those candidates, the Republican Party would be jumping up and down and screaming over. The difference, though, Piers, is this. There's a big asterisk now next to any accusations against Donald Trump. And the reason why many Americans, that in this, especially in this primary and going into the general, are saying, we don't believe you when you tell us that Donald Trump's a bad person. You said he was colluding with the Russians. We now know that the deep state lied to us. The top FBI and CIA directors were lying to us when they signed that letter. also saying the Hunter Biden laptop was not real, not authentic, and it had the markings of the Russian government.
Ben,
again,
let me
another
jump in.
example of
Ben, again, I know. Look, I know the line you're taking on this, and I don't disagree with you. I thought the Russian collusion thing was a load of trumped-up nonsense, no pun intended. I thought the way that the Hunter Biden laptop thing was suppressed by big tech was outrageous. But ultimately, we are where we are, and I still believe that the Trump route to victory for the Republicans in 2024 is fraught with danger.
Look,
final word. Well, I've got to leave it there.
The argument he's going to make is he's going to say, do you believe me or believe them? Because every time they come after me.
I get that. And there are lots of people, lots of MAGA supporters that will believe him. Dave Rubin, final question for you. Who is going to win the nomination? Give me a name.
I really think Ron DeSantis is going to win the nomination. I think the polls are closing. I think the more people get to see him, get to see the competence, the clarity, his ability to communicate the right ideas, see his track record. He's 44 years old. He's younger than me. He's got 3 young kids, fantastic wife and the First Lady of Florida, Casey DeSantis. I think he's got the right message without the baggage. And I think as time goes on, I think you're right, Piers. People are getting tired of this. That is not an excuse related to the selective persecution of Trump. But everyone has a limit to how much they can take. And I'm hearing from an awful lot of people when I travel the country. They're like, we thank Trump. We appreciate Trump. He woke us up. He red-pilled us. But that doesn't mean he has to be king forever.
You know what?
And I think if he sees the writing on the wall,
guys, I've got to leave it there, but it reminds me very much of our situation with Boris Johnson in this country.
Look at the donations. DeSantis got a lot of money coming in. Follow that as well, because there's a lot of people out there writing him big checks right now. And people said, oh, he's dead in the water. I don't think he is at all. I think this honestly, could come down to debates.
Also, I would look at the scores on the board. As DeSantis told me when I interviewed him, I'm a scores on the board guy. And he wins. And Trump, in the last few years, has been a perennial loser.